the scream that tore from Zara Ashford's throat as the wagon wheel splintered beneath her, carried across the Nebraska plains like a hawk's cry, drawing the attention of a lone rider who had been trailing 100 yards behind her struggling convoy. It was June of 1872, and Zara had been traveling for 3 weeks from Philadelphia to Nebraska City, where her brother had promised her a position teaching at the newly established schoolhouse. The promise of useful work and a fresh start had been enough to convince her to leave behind everything she knew, including a comfortable home and the memory of a failed engagement to a banker's son who had chosen his father's approval over her heart. She had expected hardship, loneliness, perhaps even danger on this journey west, but she had not expected the axle to crack on the final day of travel, leaving her stranded with an elderly couple who could barely walk, let alone help repair the damage. The rider approached at a measured pace, and Zara shaded her eyes against the late afternoon sun to get a better look at him. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders outlined against the vast sky, and even from a distance she could see the easy confidence in the way he handled his chestnut mare. As he drew closer, she noted his weathered hat, the dust coating his boots and the rope coiled at his saddle. A working man, then, a cowboy. "Trouble, madam." His voice carried a warmth that surprised her, given the roughness of his appearance. When he removed his hat, she saw sun-bronzed features, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes the color of summer grass that held genuine concern rather than the opportunistic gleam she had learned to watch for on this journey. "The wheel," she said, gesturing helplessly at the broken spoke and cracked rim. "We were so close to Nebraska City. Another few hours, perhaps, and now this." He dismounted with fluid grace and crouched beside the damaged wheel, running capable hands over the wood. "Zachary Aldridge," he said without looking up. "Most folks call me Zach. I work the cattle ranch about 5 miles east of here, running stock for the Hendersons. Zara Ashford. I'm meant to be the new schoolteacher in town." She watched as he examined the brake, noting the competence in his movements. "Can it be fixed?" "Not here. Not with what you've got." He straightened, dusting off his hands. "But I can get you and your companions to safety before dark. My ranch is closer than town, and we've got a spare wagon you can use tomorrow. I'll come back with some men to retrieve this one for proper repairs." The elderly couple, the Harrisons, had been listening from inside the wagon, and Mrs. Harrison poked her silver head through the canvas. "That's very kind of you, young man. We've been on the road so long, I confess the thought of a real roof over my head sounds like heaven itself." Zach smiled, and Zara felt something unexpected flutter in her chest. His smile transformed his face from merely handsome to genuinely beautiful, crinkling the corners of his eyes and revealing even white teeth. "Madam, I'd be honored to offer you folks whatever hospitality we have. It's not much, but it's solid and safe." The process of transferring the Harrisons and their essential belongings onto Zach's horse while he walked alongside took the better part of an hour. Zara insisted on walking as well, despite Zach's protests, unwilling to add more burden to the already loaded mare. As they made their way across the rolling grassland, Zach kept up a steady stream of conversation that put her at ease. "You're a long way from home," he observed, adjusting his pace to match her shorter stride. "Philadelphia, you said, born and raised." "My brother came out here 2 years ago, established himself in business, and wrote to me about the need for an educated woman to teach the children. The town's growing, he says, and they want to bring civilization with them." She glanced at him sideways. "Though I suppose that sounds presumptuous, as if civilization doesn't already exist out here." Zach chuckled. "No offense taken. I know what you mean. There's different kinds of civilization. You've got your book learning and formal education, which matters. We've got our own ways too, adapted to the land and the life. Both have value. His thoughtfulness surprised her. The men she had encountered on her journey had largely been rough, unlettered types or pompous businessmen who viewed the West as something to conquer and exploit. Zach seemed different, straddling both worlds with an ease she found compelling. "How long have you been in Nebraska?" she asked. "Born here, actually. My father came in 1855 before it was even a state to try his hand at farming. Didn't take. Cattle suited him better, suited me better too when I was old enough to help. He passed 4 years back, but I kept on with ranching. It's in my blood now." The Henderson Ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The main house was a sturdy wood structure, larger than Zara had expected, with a wide porch and actual glass windows. Beside it stood a barn, several outbuildings, and a bunkhouse where she could see smoke rising from a chimney. A tall, graying man emerged from the barn as they approached, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Zach. "Found some strays, did you, Bob Henderson? Meet Miss Zara Ashford and Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. Their wagon broke down about 2 hours west. I promised them shelter for the night and the use of our spare wagon tomorrow." Bob's handshake was firm and welcoming. "Any friend of Zach's is welcome here. Come on inside, my wife Sarah will want to make you comfortable. She's been cooking all afternoon and we've got more than enough to share." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable, with sturdy furniture and colorful woven rugs on the wooden floors. Sarah Henderson was a plump woman with kind eyes who immediately took charge of getting the Harrisons settled in the guest room and showing Zara to a small but clean space that served as a sewing room with a David. "You'll be more comfortable here than in the bunkhouse with the ranch hands," Sarah said with a warm smile. "Supper will be ready in an hour. Feel free to rest or freshen up as you need." Left alone, Zara sat on the edge of the David and allowed herself to feel the exhaustion of the past weeks. Every muscle ached from the constant jostling of the wagon, and her nerves were frayed from the endless vigilance required on the trail. But beneath the weariness, she felt something else. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just the strange exhilaration of knowing she had made it, that Nebraska City was within reach, that her new life was about to begin. She thought of Zachary Aldridge, of the quiet competence in his movements and the kindness in his eyes. A cowboy, a working man who made his living from the land and the cattle. So different from the men she had known in Philadelphia, with their starched collars and calculated conversations about profit margins and social standing. There was an honesty to Zach that appealed to her, a directness she found refreshing. Supper was a lively affair, with Sarah's excellent cooking and easy conversation flowing around the table. Besides the Hendersons and their guests, there were 3 ranch hands who ate with them. 2 young men named Tommy and Jack, and an older cowboy called Pete who had a scar running down one cheek and a talent for storytelling that had everyone laughing. Zara found herself seated next to Zach, acutely aware of his presence in a way that both disconcerted and pleased her. When he passed her the bowl of potatoes, their fingers brushed, and she felt that flutter in her chest again, stronger this time. "Tell us about Philadelphia," Sarah urged. "I've never been further east than Iowa. What's it like in a big city?" Zara described the crowded streets, the grand buildings, the theaters and concert halls. But as she talked, she realized how little she had actually participated in that life. Her family had been comfortable but not wealthy, and after her mother's death when Zara was 16, she had spent most of her time caring for her father and younger siblings until they were grown. By the time she had been free to pursue her own interests, her father had passed too, and her siblings had scattered. The engagement to Richard had been more about security than love, and when he had ended it, she had felt relief more than heartbreak. "It sounds exciting," Tommy said, his young face alight with curiosity. "But I don't think I could stand being that closed in, with buildings blocking the sky." "You get used to it," Zara said, "just as I suppose I'll get used to all this space." She gestured toward the window, where the darkening prairie stretched endlessly. "Though I confess it's a bit overwhelming right now." "Give it time," Zach said quietly. "The land grows on you. One day you'll look out at the horizon, and instead of feeling small, you'll feel free." The way he said it with such conviction made her believe him. After supper, the Harrisons retired early, exhausted from the day's events, and Sarah began clearing the table. Zara rose to help, but Sarah waved her away. "You're a guest tonight. Tomorrow, when you're settled in town, you can worry about chores. Tonight you rest. Zach, why don't you show Miss Ashford the porch? The stars should be coming out nicely." It was clearly a gentle push toward spending time together, and Zara felt her cheeks warm. But Zach simply offered his arm with easy courtesy, and she took it, allowing him to guide her outside. The night air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of grass and the distant smell of cattle. Above them, the sky was beginning to fill with stars, more stars than Zara had ever seen in her life. In the city, the lights and smoke had obscured most of the heavens, but here they blazed with breathtaking clarity. "Oh," she breathed, stopping in her tracks to stare upward. "I've never seen anything like this." Zach looked up too, and she noticed he was still holding her arm gently, steadying her. "I never get tired of it. Every night is different, but every night is beautiful." They stood in companionable silence for a while, and Zara found herself relaxing in a way she had not relaxed in months. There was something solid and reassuring about Zach's presence, something that made her feel safe in this vast, unfamiliar landscape. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally, her voice soft in the darkness. "Of course." "Why did you help us today? You could have ridden on." "Many people would have." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "My father used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when it's convenient, but what they do when it costs them something. Helping you didn't cost me much, just a few hours and some effort, but not helping would have cost me my peace of mind. How could I ride past people in need and still call myself decent?" "That's a good answer," Zara said. "A better answer than I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something about duty or religion or what people would think. The usual reasons people give for doing good things." Zach turned to face her more fully, and in the starlight she could see the serious expression on his face. "I do things because they're right, not because someone's watching. Out here, you can't always count on witnesses. The land and the work strip away the pretense pretty quickly. You learn to be honest, at least with yourself." "I like that," Zara said. "I spent too many years surrounded by pretense. It's refreshing to meet someone who says what they mean." "Then we're even, because I find it refreshing to meet an educated woman who doesn't mind getting her hands dirty. I noticed you insisted on walking today instead of riding while the Harrisons needed the horse. That spoke well of you." They talked for another hour on that porch, about everything and nothing. Zach told her about ranch life, about the rhythms of the seasons and the challenges of working with cattle. She told him about her hopes for the school, about the books she loved, and the idea she had for starting a lending library in town. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, and Zara found herself laughing more than she had in months. When she finally retired to her room, she lay awake for a long time, thinking about green eyes and calloused hands and a smile that made her heart race. She was being foolish, she told herself. She had just met this man. She was here to teach, to build a new life for herself, not to fall for the first handsome cowboy who showed her kindness. But her heart did not seem to be listening to reason. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Zara woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. By the time she had dressed and joined the others for breakfast, Zach had already hitched the spare wagon and loaded the Harrisons' belongings into it. "I'll drive you folks into town," he said, accepting a cup of coffee from Sarah. "Bob can spare me for the day, and I want to make sure you get settled properly." The ride into Nebraska City took about 3 hours, and Zara spent most of it sitting on the wagon bench beside Zach while the Harrisons dozed in the back. The prairie rolled past them in waves of green and gold, dotted with wildflowers and the occasional stand of cottonwood trees. Hawks circled overhead, and once they saw a small herd of pronghorn antelope bounding away in the distance. "There's your new home," Zach said at last, pointing ahead to where the town was taking shape on the horizon. Nebraska City was larger than Zara had expected, a growing community perched on the bluffs above the Missouri River. She could see the main street lined with buildings, some brick and some wood, and the evidence of new construction everywhere. Her brother had written that the town was booming, benefiting from its position as a jumping-off point for settlers heading further west, and she could see the truth of it in the busy streets. Zach drove them directly to the address Zara's brother had provided, a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, a small, energetic woman who greeted them at the door. "Miss Ashford, we've been expecting you. Your brother stopped by yesterday to make sure everything was ready." She ushered them inside, already talking rapid fire about meals and laundry and house rules. The Harrisons would be staying elsewhere, having relatives in town, and after warm goodbyes and promises to stay in touch, they departed in a hired carriage. Zach helped carry Zara's trunk up to her room, a small but pleasant space with a window overlooking the street. When he set down the trunk, he turned to her with an expression she could not quite read. "I should head back to the ranch," he said, "but I wonder if I might call on you sometime. Maybe take you to dinner, show you around town properly." Zara's heart leaped. "I would like that very much." His smile was radiant. "Saturday evening, then. I'll come by around 6. "Saturday at 6, she agreed. After he left, Zara stood at her window watching him climb back onto the wagon and guide the horses down the street. Mrs. Chen appeared at her elbow, a knowing smile on her face. "That's Zachary Aldridge," she said. "Good man, that one. Works hard, treats people right." "You could do a lot worse out here." Zara felt her cheeks flush. "He was kind enough to help us when our wagon broke down. MMHMM. Mrs. Chen's tone was amused, "and judging by the way he looked at you, I'd say his kindness extends beyond wagon repairs. But come, let me show you the rest of the house, and then we should get you over to meet your brother and see the schoolhouse." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Zara's brother, Zachary, was a serious man of 30 who had made a success of himself in the mercantile business. He was pleased to see her settled and took her on a tour of the town, introducing her to the mayor, the minister, and various other important citizens. The schoolhouse was a new building, still smelling of fresh paint and lumber, with rows of desks and a large blackboard. Zara felt a thrill of excitement looking at it, imagining the children she would teach, the difference she might make. She spent her days preparing lessons and organizing the classroom, but her thoughts kept drifting to Zach. She found herself looking forward to Saturday with an anticipation that both thrilled and worried her. It had been so long since she had felt this way about anyone, and she barely knew him. Yet there was something about him that called to her, something that felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. Saturday arrived at last, and Zara took extra care with her appearance, choosing a deep blue dress that brought out her eyes and arranging her dark hair in a style that was elegant but not too formal. When Zach arrived precisely at 6, the admiration in his eyes told her the effort had been worth it. He had cleaned up too, she noticed, wearing a pressed shirt and clean trousers, his hair still slightly damp from washing. He offered his arm, and they walked down the street to the hotel restaurant, the finest dining establishment in town. Over dinner, they talked with the same easy comfort they had found on the ranch. Zach asked about her week, genuinely interested in her plans for the school, and she asked about the ranch, learning more about the daily work of managing cattle and maintaining the property. "It's not an easy life," he said honestly. "The work is hard, the hours are long, and you're at the mercy of weather and market prices. But there's a satisfaction to it, building something with your own hands, watching the herd grow, seeing the results of your labor. I can't imagine doing anything else." "I feel the same way about teaching," Zara said. "My father wanted me to marry well, settle into running a household, and there's nothing wrong with that for women who want it. But I wanted to do something more, to use my education for something beyond managing servants and planning dinner parties." "Your father didn't approve. He came around eventually before he died. He saw how much I loved it, how good I was at it. My fiancé, though, he never understood." She paused, realizing she had mentioned Richard for the first time. "I was engaged briefly to a banker's son. He wanted a wife who would be an ornament to his career, someone to host parties and look pretty. When I insisted on continuing to teach, he gave me an ultimatum. I chose teaching." Zach reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The touch sent warmth flooding through her. "Then he was a fool. Any man worth having would support what makes you happy, not try to diminish it." "That's what I think too," Zara said softly, though it took me a while to believe it. After dinner, they walked along the bluffs overlooking the river, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. The evening was warm, and the sound of the river below them was soothing. Zach kept her hand tucked in his arm, and Zara felt perfectly content, perfectly at peace. "I'm glad your wagon broke down," Zach said suddenly, then laughed. "That sounds terrible. I'm not glad you had trouble, but I'm glad it brought you to the ranch, glad I got to meet you." "I'm glad too," Zara admitted. "I expected this whole journey to be nothing but hardship and difficulty. I was prepared for that, braced for it. I never expected to find joy." "And have you? Found joy, I mean?" She looked up at him, at his honest, open face and the hope in his green eyes. "I'm beginning to." He smiled, and then, very slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, sweet, and Zara felt as if the whole world had narrowed to just this moment, just the two of them. When they parted, she was breathless. "I should probably tell you," Zach said, his voice slightly unsteady, "that I'm not much for games or pretense. I like you, Zara, more than I've liked anyone in a very long time. I know we've only just met, but I'd like to keep seeing you to see where this might go." "I'd like that too," Zara said. "Very much." They courted through the summer and into the fall, seeing each other whenever Zach could get away from the ranch. He came to town every Saturday, taking her to dinner, to church socials, on long walks through the countryside. Zara met his friends, and he met hers, and everyone seemed to agree they were well suited. The school opened in September, and Zara found herself with 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. She loved every challenging, exhausting moment of it. Teaching on the frontier was different from teaching in Philadelphia. Her students came from varied backgrounds, some barely able to read, others surprisingly well educated. She had to adapt her methods, be creative with limited supplies, but she thrived on the challenge. Zach came to visit one day during lunch break, bringing apples from a tree on the ranch property. The children were delighted, and Zara watched with a full heart as he talked easily with them, asking about their lessons and telling them stories about ranch life. He was good with children, patient and kind, and she found herself imagining a future where he might be father to her own children. The thought should have frightened her, but instead it filled her with warmth. In October, Zach invited her to the ranch for a harvest celebration the Hendersons were hosting. The event was a grand affair by frontier standards, with neighboring ranchers and their families gathering for food, music, and dancing. Zara wore her best dress and felt almost shy as Zach introduced her to everyone as "my Zara." The possessive sent a thrill through her. They danced under the stars, Zach's arms strong around her, and Zara knew without question that she was in love with him. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had come west expecting loneliness and hardship, and instead she had found a home and a man who made her heart sing. "You're quiet," Zach observed as they swayed to the music. "What are you thinking?" "That I'm happy," Zara said simply. "Happier than I've been in years." "Good." He pulled her a little closer, propriety be damned. "Because I've been wanting to talk to you about something." Her heart began to race. "What's that?" "Not here. Later when we can be alone." The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant haze, but Zara's nerves were strung tight with anticipation. When the party finally began to wind down and guests started heading home, Zach took her hand and led her away from the house, out to a small rise where they could see the stars spread above them like diamonds on velvet. "I've been thinking," he began, then stopped, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had come to recognize as nervousness. "I'm not good with fancy words, Zara. I'm just a simple man, a working man, but I know what I feel and I know what I want." "What do you want, Zach?" He took both her hands in his, looking directly into her eyes. "You. I want you not just for now but for always. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. I love you, Zara Ashford. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to her eyes, happy tears that blurred the stars above. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Zach, yes." He swept her into his arms, spinning her around, both of them laughing with joy. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, thoroughly, a kiss full of promise and passion and love. "I don't have a ring yet," he said when they finally parted. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you'd say yes before I spent the money, but I'll get you one, a proper one." "I don't need a fancy ring," Zara said. "I just need you." "You'll have both," he promised. "I want to do this right, Zara. You deserve everything." They decided on a December wedding, giving them time to prepare and for Zara to finish the first term of school. The news spread quickly through Nebraska City, and Zara was surprised by how warmly people responded. She had worried that some might look down on her for marrying a cowboy, for choosing ranch life over town life, but instead, everyone seemed genuinely happy for them. Zachary gave his approval, though he cautioned his sister about the hardships of ranch life. "It's not easy, Zara. You'll be isolated far from town doing work you've never done before." "I know," Zara said, "but I love him, Zachary, and I'm not afraid of hard work." Her brother smiled. "I can see that, and he's a good man. I've asked around and everyone speaks well of him. If this is what you want, you have my blessing." Zara threw her arms around him, grateful for his support. She had not realized how much it mattered until that moment. The weeks leading up to the wedding were busy ones. Zara continued teaching while also preparing for her new life. Sarah Henderson took her under her wing, teaching her ranch skills she would need: how to manage a larger household, how to preserve food, how to handle the isolation of ranch life. The older woman became a friend and mentor, and Zara was grateful for her wisdom. "Marriage is work," Sarah told her one afternoon as they canned vegetables together. "But good work, satisfying work. Zach is a fine man, but he's still a man. He'll leave his boots muddy and forget to tell you when he'll be late for supper. But he'll also work himself to exhaustion to provide for you, and he'll love you with everything he has. That's the kind of man he is." "How long have you and Bob been married?" Zara asked. 32 years come March. We married young, came west together when this was still wild territory. It was hard, so hard. I can't count the number of times I cried myself to sleep, wondering if we'd made a terrible mistake. But Bob never wavered. He built this ranch from nothing, and I stood beside him every step. Now I look at what we've built together, and I can't imagine any other life. The wedding took place on a bright December day when fresh snow covered the ground in a pristine white blanket. The ceremony was held in the small church in town, with Reverend Matthews officiating. Zara wore a simple but elegant dress of cream-colored silk that Zacharias had ordered specially from St. Louis, and she carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers that Zach had collected and preserved for her. When she walked down the aisle and saw Zach waiting for her at the altar, looking handsome in his best suit, his eyes full of love and wonder, she felt her heart might burst with happiness. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Matthews began, and Zara barely heard the familiar words. She was too focused on Zach, on the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. When it came time for vows, Zach's voice was strong and clear. "I, Zachary, take you, Zara, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, good or bad. I promise to build a life with you that's worthy of your trust." Zara's voice shook slightly with emotion as she spoke her own vows. "I, Zara, take you, Zachary, to be my husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, good or bad. I promise to build a life with you filled with joy and purpose." The ring Zach slipped onto her finger was simple gold, but to Zara it was more beautiful than any diamond. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife and Zach kissed her, the small congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing late into the night. Zara danced with her new husband, with her brother, with Bob Henderson and various townspeople who had become friends. She was glowing with happiness, and everyone commented on how radiant she looked. As the evening drew to a close, Zach leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Aldridge?" The name sent a thrill through her. "Yes, Mr. Aldridge, I'm ready." They had decided to live on the Henderson Ranch, at least initially, in a small house that had been built for a foreman years ago but had stood empty. Bob and Sarah had helped them fix it up, and though it was modest, it was theirs. Zach had spent weeks making improvements, adding shelves for Zara's books, building a desk where she could prepare lessons, making sure everything was as comfortable as possible. The ride out to the ranch was quiet, both of them wrapped in warm blankets against the cold. When they arrived, Zach insisted on carrying Zara over the threshold, making her laugh as he nearly bumped her head on the doorframe. Inside, he had lit lamps and started a fire in the hearth, and the house was warm and welcoming. He set her down gently, and for a moment they just stood there looking at each other. "I love you," Zach said softly. "I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy." "You already make me happy," Zara said, "just by being you." Their first night as husband and wife was tender and sweet, full of discovery and delight. Zach was gentle, attentive, making sure Zara felt cherished and safe. Afterward, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Zara thought about the journey that had brought her here, all the hardships and uncertainties, and marveled at how it had all led to this moment of perfect contentment. Winter settled over the ranch, and Zara learned the rhythms of her new life. She continued teaching, rising early to help Zach with morning chores before riding into town for school. It was exhausting, but she thrived on it. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Zach mending tack or carving while Zara graded papers or read aloud from her books. They talked about everything, sharing their thoughts and dreams, building the foundation of their life together. There were challenges, of course. A blizzard in January that trapped them in the house for 3 days, testing Zara's patience with the isolation. A difficult calving in February where Zach was up all night and came home exhausted and discouraged. Times when money was tight, when Zara worried about whether they could afford the things they needed. But there were also moments of pure joy. The first time Zach taught her to ride properly, laughing as she bounced awkwardly in the saddle before finally finding her rhythm. The evening she surprised him with his favorite meal after a particularly hard day, and he picked her up and spun her around, kissing her soundly. The quiet Sunday mornings when they could sleep late and wake up slowly, wrapped in each other's warmth. Spring came, and with it new life. The calves were born, filling the fields with their awkward, endearing antics. Wildflowers bloomed across the prairie, painting it in brilliant colors. And Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Zach one evening after supper, too excited to find a more romantic moment. "I'm going to have a baby." He stared at her for a long moment, his expression stunned, and then a smile spread across his face like sunrise. "A baby, we're having a baby." "Yes," she laughed. "In September, the doctor thinks." Zach let out a whoop and picked her up, then immediately set her down again, suddenly cautious. "Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Are you all right? Do you need to sit down? Should I get you some water?" "Zach, I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Zara said, amused by his sudden nervousness. "I'm fine." But he fussed over her anyway, insisting she rest more, do less heavy work. It was endearing, if sometimes exasperating. Sarah laughed when Zara complained about it. "Let him fuss," the older woman advised. "It's how he shows his love, and trust me, you'll appreciate the help as you get further along." Zara had to stop teaching in May, as her pregnancy became too obvious to ignore, and the school board felt it was inappropriate for her to continue in her condition. She was disappointed but understood, and besides, she was becoming increasingly uncomfortable in the summer heat. She spent her days preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, reading every book about childbirth and infant care she could find. Zach built a cradle, beautiful and sturdy, carved with intricate designs. Watching him work on it, his face intent with concentration, Zara felt a wave of love so strong it almost hurt. This man, this good, kind, hardworking man, was her husband and the father of her child. How had she gotten so lucky? Their son was born on a warm September evening in 1873, after a labor that lasted 12 hours and left Zara exhausted but euphoric. Zach was there for all of it, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, the doctor placed him in Zara's arms and she looked down at him in wonder. "He's perfect," she whispered. "He's beautiful," Zach agreed, his voice rough with emotion, "just like his mother." They named him Zachary Aldridge, after both his grandfathers. Little Zach, as they called him, was a healthy baby with his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was also, Zara discovered quickly, quite vocal about his needs. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings. Zara was grateful for Sarah's help and advice, for Zach's willingness to walk the floor with a crying baby in the middle of the night, for the support of her friends in town. It was hard, harder than anything she had done before, but it was also profoundly rewarding. Watching Zach with their son filled Zara's heart to overflowing. He was patient and gentle, singing little songs to the baby, making silly faces to coax out smiles. When little Zach was fussy, his father could calm him with a touch. The bond between them was evident from the start. As their son grew, so did their happiness. Little Zach was a curious, active child, always exploring, always getting into things. He took his first steps at 10 months, much to his mother's alarm and his father's pride. By 18 months, he was running everywhere, a whirlwind of energy that kept both parents on their toes. Zara returned to teaching when little Zach was 2, taking him with her to the schoolhouse. The older students doted on him, and he learned his letters and numbers alongside them, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Zach had expanded their house, adding rooms to accommodate their growing family, and their home was filled with laughter and love. In the spring of 1876, Zara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was less of a surprise and more of a joyful confirmation of what she had already suspected. Their daughter, Zoe Marie Aldridge, was born in November, arriving quickly and easily compared to her brother's difficult entrance. Zoe was a calm baby, content to watch the world with serious dark eyes. Where little Zach was all energy and motion, Zoe was thoughtful and observant. They complemented each other perfectly, and watching them together as they grew filled Zara with contentment. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Little Zach started school officially at 6, proud to be a student in his mother's classroom. Zoe followed 2 years later, equally eager to learn. Zach Sr. expanded the cattle operation, hiring more hands and increasing the herd. Money was no longer quite so tight, and they were able to make improvements to the house and save for the future. They faced hardships too. A drought in 1878 that killed part of the herd and left everyone anxious and struggling. An outbreak of scarlet fever in town that terrified Zara until she was sure her children were safe. The death of Bob Henderson in 1880, a loss that hit them all hard. Zach helped Sarah keep the ranch running, and eventually they bought it from her when she decided to move to town to be closer to her daughter. Through it all, Zara and Zach's love deepened and matured. They knew each other completely now, the good and the bad. They knew how to comfort each other, how to make each other laugh, how to navigate disagreements with respect and care. They were partners in every sense, working together to build a life and a legacy. On their 10th anniversary, Zach surprised Zara with a trip to Omaha, their first time away from the ranch and children for more than a day. Sarah insisted on watching little Zach and Zoe, who were 8 and 6 respectively, and Zacharias arranged for them to stay at the best hotel in the city. Walking down city streets again, Zara was struck by how much she had changed. The woman who had arrived in Nebraska 10 years ago, anxious and uncertain, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more confident, deeply rooted in this land and this life. "Do you ever miss it?" Zach asked as they watched a theater performance. City life, all the culture and excitement, Zara considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss certain things. The theaters, the libraries, the variety, but I don't miss the life itself. Everything that matters to me is in Nebraska City. You, our children, our home, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Even though it's been hard sometimes, especially because it's been hard," Zara said firmly. "The easy life I left behind was empty. This life, our life, it's real. It's meaningful, and I built it myself with you. That means everything. Zach pulled her close, kissing her temple. I love you, Zara, more now than ever. I love you too, she whispered back. They returned home to find chaos. Zoe had apparently convinced little Zach to help her redecorate the parlor, which involved moving all the furniture and painting a mural on the wall with mud. Sarah was laughing too hard to be properly stern, and both children looked appropriately sheepish. They're creative, I'll give them that, Sarah said, still chuckling. The picture of the ranch is actually quite good. Zara looked at the mud painting and had to agree. Despite the mess, there was real talent there. She made the children clean up and apologize, but she also praised Zoe's artistic eye and little Zach's willingness to help his sister. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Zara and Zach sat on their porch watching the stars, his arm around her shoulders. 10 years, Zach mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I found you stranded on the prairie. Other times it feels like you've always been here, like I can't remember what life was like before you. I feel the same way, Zara said. When I think about how scared I was, coming out here, expecting nothing but hardship and loneliness, and then finding you, finding all of this, it's like a dream. It's real, though, Zach said, squeezing her gently. As real as it gets. Yes, Zara agreed. Real and wonderful. The years continued to unfold. Little Zach grew into a serious young man, interested in ranching like his father but also showing his mother's love of learning. He talked about attending agricultural college, learning new techniques to improve the ranch. Zoe developed her artistic talents, filling sketchbooks with drawings of the prairie, the animals, the people around her. She talked about becoming a teacher like her mother, or maybe an artist. Zara continued teaching until 1885, when she was 42, and feeling ready to pass the torch to a younger teacher. By then, she had taught nearly every child in Nebraska City, had seen her students grow up and have children of their own. She had made a difference, had brought education and opportunity to a community that valued both. It was time to step back and focus on her family and the ranch. In 1887, little Zach, now 15, took on more responsibilities at the ranch. He was tall and strong, with his father's easy way with animals and his mother's quick mind. Zara watched him work alongside Zach, saw the pride in her husband's eyes, and felt her heart swell. Zoe, at 13, was already talking about going to art school in Chicago or St. Louis. The idea terrified Zara, sending her daughter so far away, but she understood the need. She had left Philadelphia seeking her own path. How could she deny her daughter the same opportunity? She'll come back, Zach assured her. Nebraska is in her blood just like it's in ours. She'll go, she'll learn, and she'll come back to share what she's learned. He was right, Zara knew. But that did not make the thought of separation any easier. In 1890, as the century drew toward its close, Zara and Zach celebrated their 18th anniversary. Little Zach was 18 now, a man grown, running much of the ranch operation himself. He had his eye on a girl in town, the blacksmith's daughter, and Zara suspected an engagement was not far off. Zoe was 16, preparing to leave for art school in St. Louis, her talent earning her a scholarship. Zara was 47, Zach 49, and they were both graying and showing the wear of hard living. But they were healthy and content, surrounded by the life they had built together. On a warm June evening, they rode out to the spot where Zach had first proposed, the little rise where you could see the stars so clearly. They had not been here in years, caught up in the busyness of life, but tonight they needed to remember to reconnect. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" Zach asked as they sat together on the grass, their horses grazing nearby. You asked me to marry you, Zara said. How could I forget? No, before that. You said you expected hardship when you came west, but you found joy instead. I did say that, Zara remembered, and it was true, is still true. We've had our share of hardship, Zach pointed out. The droughts, the struggles, the worries about money and children and everything else. Yes, Zara agreed, but the joy has far outweighed it. Every hard thing we faced together, and that made all the difference. Zach turned to her, taking her hands. I want you to know that loving you, building this life with you, has been the greatest honor of my existence. You made me better, Zara. You made everything better. Tears filled her eyes. You did the same for me. Before I met you, I was existing, not living. You taught me what it means to truly live, to love without reservation, to embrace life in all its messiness and beauty. They held each other as the stars came out. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. Little Zach did propose to Mary, the blacksmith's daughter, that summer, and they married in October of 1890. The wedding was a grand affair, with the whole town turning out to celebrate. Watching her son pledge his love to a good woman, Zara was reminded of her own wedding 18 years before, of the hope and joy of beginning a new life together. Zoe left for St. Louis in January of 1891, and the house felt empty without her bright presence. But she wrote often, long letters describing her classes and her new friends and the art she was creating. Zara saved every letter, treasuring these glimpses into her daughter's expanding world. In March of 1891, Mary announced she was pregnant, and Zara realized with a jolt that she was about to become a grandmother. The thought was strange and wonderful. She was not old, not really, but this marked a new chapter, a new role. Little Zach and Mary's son, William Zachary Aldridge, was born in November of 1891, a healthy baby with a lusty cry and a head full of dark hair. Holding her grandson for the first time, Zara was overwhelmed with emotion. This child was the future, the continuation of the family she and Zach had started. Makes you feel old, doesn't it? Zach teased, though his own eyes were suspiciously moist as he looked at his grandson. Makes me feel blessed, Zara corrected. We have so much, Zach. So much more than I ever dreamed possible. Zoe returned home for Christmas that year, full of stories about St. Louis and her art education. She had grown more sophisticated, more worldly, but underneath, Zara could still see her little girl. They spent long hours talking, catching up, reconnecting. I've been offered a position, Zoe said one evening. Teaching art at a women's college in St. Louis. The pay is good and it would give me stability, a real career. But, Zara prompted, sensing hesitation. But I miss home, Zoe admitted. I love St. Louis, love the opportunities there. But my heart is here, with the prairie and the big sky and you and Papa. I've been thinking about coming back, maybe opening a studio in Nebraska City, teaching private lessons and selling my paintings. What does your heart tell you to do? Zara asked. It tells me to come home, Zoe said softly. But I don't want to disappoint you and Papa. You supported my dream of going to art school. What if coming back means I'm not living up to my potential? Zara took her daughter's hands. Your potential isn't determined by where you live, Zoe. It's determined by how fully you embrace your life and your gifts. If your heart is calling you home, then home is where you should be. Your father and I will support you no matter what you decide. Zoe's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Mama. I needed to hear that. She did come home in the spring of 1892 and opened her studio in a small building on Main Street. Her paintings of prairie life, of the vast landscapes and the people who inhabited them, attracted attention from as far away as Chicago. She was making a name for herself, proving that you did not have to live in a big city to be a successful artist. The years of the 1890s were good ones for the Aldridge family. The ranch prospered, with little Zach proving to be an even better cattleman than his father. He and Mary had 2 more children, daughters named Emma and Claire. Zoe met a journalist who had come to Nebraska City to write about frontier life, and they married in 1894. His name was Thomas Wright, and he was a good man who supported Zoe's art and shared her love of the prairie. Zara and Zach grew older together, their hair going white, their faces lined with years of sun and wind and laughter. They were not as spry as they once were, but they were content. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. In the summer of 1899, they celebrated their 27th anniversary with a big party at the ranch. All their children and grandchildren were there, along with friends from town and neighboring ranches. Looking around at the crowd, at the life and love that filled their home, Zara felt a profound sense of accomplishment. "We did all right, didn't we?" Zach said, echoing her thoughts as he often did after all these years together. "We did better than all right," Zara said. "We did wonderfully." As the new century dawned in 1900, Zara was 57 and Zach was 59. They had been married for 28 years, had raised 2 successful, happy children, and had 5 grandchildren with another on the way. The ranch was thriving under little Zach's management. Zoe's art was being shown in galleries across the Midwest. They had weathered every storm, overcome every obstacle, and their love had only grown stronger. One evening in May of 1900, they sat on their porch as they had so many times before, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Zach reached over and took Zara's hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "I've been thinking," he said, "about that day I found you stranded with the Harrisons. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had ridden past, if I had been too busy or too tired to stop." "But you did stop," Zara pointed out. "You chose kindness, and it changed both our lives." "I would make the same choice every time," Zach said. "1,000 times over. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara Aldridge." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Zara replied. "I came west expecting nothing but hardship and struggle. Instead, I found joy. I found love. I found home. All because a kind cowboy stopped to help a stranded stranger." "We found each other," Zach corrected gently. "And we built a life worth living." "Yes," Zara agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We certainly did." They sat together as the stars came out, 2 people who had loved each other for nearly 3 decades, who had built a legacy of love and family and hard work. The prairie wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of grass and earth and home. Little Zach and Mary came by the next morning with news. They had decided to build a bigger house on the far side of the ranch property to accommodate their growing family. They wanted Zara and Zach to stay in the main house, the home they had built and filled with memories. "This is your house," young Zach said firmly. "It always will be. We'll be close by, but this place belongs to you and Mama." Zara looked at her son, now a man of 28 with a family of his own, and felt pride swell in her chest. They had raised him right, taught him the values that mattered. He was continuing what they had started, building on the foundation they had laid. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Zara spent her days tending her garden, reading, playing with her grandchildren. Zach still worked on the ranch, though he left the heavy labor to the younger men. They took long walks together, talked about everything and nothing, enjoyed the simple pleasure of each other's company. In the fall of 1901, Zoe gave birth to twin boys, and the family rejoiced. The house was constantly full of children and grandchildren, of laughter and noise and life. Zara loved every chaotic moment. One evening in November of 1902, as they sat by the fire after supper, Zach turned to Zara with a serious expression. "I want you to know something," he said. "If anything ever happens to me, I want you to keep living, keep enjoying life. Don't shut yourself away in grief." "Zach, why are you talking about this?" Zara asked, alarmed. "I'm 61 years old, Zara. I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon, but we both know nothing lasts forever. I just need you to promise me that you'll keep going, keep loving life the way you always have." "Only if you promise the same," Zara said. "We made vows, Zach, for better or worse until death parts us. When that time comes, we'll face it together just like we've faced everything else." He smiled and pulled her close. Together, always together. They were blessed with more years, years that passed in a blur of seasons and celebrations. More grandchildren were born, 7 in total by 1905. Little Zach took over complete management of the ranch, allowing his father to finally fully retire. Zach Sr. spent his days teaching his grandchildren to ride, to rope, to understand the land and the animals. Zara taught them to read, to think, to question and explore. In the summer of 1907, they celebrated their 35th anniversary. The party was enormous, with people coming from all over Nebraska to celebrate with them. Speeches were made, toasts were given, and through it all, Zara and Zach held hands, their love as evident now as it had been on their wedding day. 35 years, Zara marveled that night as they prepared for bed. "How is that possible? It feels like no time at all." "Time flies when you're happy," Zach said, "and I've been happy every day I've spent with you. Even the hard days," Zara teased. "Especially the hard days," Zach replied seriously. "Because those were the days when I learned what we were really made of, when I saw your strength and courage and determination. Those were the days when I fell in love with you all over again." Zara kissed him, a kiss full of tenderness and passion and 3.5 decades of shared life. "I love you, Zachary Aldridge, more than words can say." "I love you too, Zara, more than life itself." They continued to age together, their bodies slowing but their minds still sharp. They watched the world change around them. Automobiles began to appear in Nebraska City, though Zach swore he would never give up his horses. The telephone lines reached the ranch, connecting them to town in a way that would have seemed miraculous in 1872. But some things did not change. The prairie was still vast and beautiful. The stars still blazed overhead at night, and Zara and Zach still loved each other with a depth and commitment that inspired everyone who knew them. In the spring of 1910, Zach fell ill with pneumonia. Zara nursed him through it, sitting by his bedside day and night, refusing to leave him. The doctor was concerned given Zach's age, but Zara's fierce determination seemed to will him back to health. After 2 weeks, he was on the mend, weak but recovering. "You scared me," Zara said one afternoon as he sat propped up in bed, eating the soup she had made. "I scared myself," Zach admitted. "I'm not ready to go yet, Zara. There's still too much living to do." "Then we'll keep living," Zara said firmly. "For as long as we can, we'll keep loving and living." And they did. They celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1912, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Little Zach was 40 now, his own hair starting to gray. Zoe was 38, a successful artist whose work was known throughout the region. Their family had grown large and prosperous, a testament to the love and hard work of 2 people who had found each other on the Nebraska prairie all those years ago. On a summer evening in 1913, Zara and Zach sat on their porch, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. They were 70 and 72 now, their bodies frail but their spirits still strong. "You remember what you told me," Zara said softly. "That day we met. You said that one day I would look at the horizon and instead of feeling small, I would feel free." "I remember," Zach said. "You were right. I do feel free. This land, this life, this love we built together, it freed me in ways I never imagined possible." Zach squeezed her hand gently. "You freed me too. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me what it means to really live, to love deeply, to build something that matters." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. Around them, their family laughed and played, the sound of their joy a testament to the life Zara and Zach had built together. "Thank you," Zara said finally, "for stopping that day when you found me stranded, for choosing kindness, for loving me." "Thank you," Zach replied, "for saying yes, for taking a chance on a simple cowboy, for building this beautiful life with me." As the stars began to appear overhead, they held hands and watched the night sky. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and had loved each other faithfully through 4 decades of joy and hardship, triumph and challenge. They had expected hardship on the frontier, but they had found so much more. They had found purpose and family and home. But most of all, they had found each other, and that had made all the difference. The years continued to pass gently. In 1915, they celebrated their 43rd anniversary quietly, their bodies too frail for large celebrations. They were content with simple pleasures now, sitting together in the sunshine, visits from their children and grandchildren, quiet conversations about the past and the present. Zach passed away peacefully in his sleep in January of 1916, at the age of 75. He had been working in the barn that afternoon, insisting he was still capable despite everyone's protests, and had come in tired but happy. He and Zara had eaten dinner together, talking about their plans for spring planting, and had gone to bed early. When Zara woke in the morning, he was gone, a peaceful expression on his weathered face. The grief was overwhelming, but Zara found strength in her family and her memories. She had loved him for 44 years, and she would carry that love with her for whatever time she had left. At his funeral, she stood tall despite her tears and spoke about the man he had been. Kind, hardworking, devoted, a man who had built a legacy of love and integrity. "He was the best thing that ever happened to me," she said, her voice strong despite her age and grief. "And I am grateful for every moment we had together." She lived another 5 years, surrounded by the family they had built together. She held new great-grandchildren, watched the ranch continue to prosper under her son's capable management, saw Zoe's art gain even more recognition. She tended her garden, read her books, and told stories about Zach to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive and bright. On a warm June evening in 1921, Zara sat on her porch one last time, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. She was 78 years old, and she was tired, ready to rest. But she was also profoundly grateful for the life she had lived, for the love she had known, for the family she had raised. As the stars began to appear, she thought she could hear Zach's voice on the wind, calling her home. She smiled, closed her eyes and let go, slipping away peacefully as the prairie night wrapped around her like a blanket. They buried her next to Zach on the ranch, under a spreading cottonwood tree they had planted together decades before. Their graves looked out over the prairie they had both loved, and on the headstone, their son had carved a simple inscription, Zachary and Zara Aldridge. They found joy in each other and built a legacy of love. Their story became part of the family lore, passed down through generations. Great-grandchildren told their own children about the woman who came west expecting hardship and found joy instead, about the cowboy who stopped to help a stranger and found his soulmate, about a love that lasted through 4 decades and beyond death itself. The ranch they built continued to thrive, managed by their descendants who carried on the values they had instilled: hard work, kindness, integrity, and love. Zoe's paintings hung in museums, beautiful reminders of the prairie life her parents had embraced. The school where Zara taught was renamed in her honor, recognizing her contribution to education in Nebraska City. But perhaps their greatest legacy was simply this: they had loved each other well. They had faced hardship and found joy. They had built a life together that mattered, that endured, that inspired others to believe in the power of love and commitment and choosing each other every single day. And in the end, that was everything.